The next President Wilson of Cleveland.
Yep. Mr. President, go ahead. We met earlier. If you want to get up and speak, you are welcome to do that.
Good evening. Thank you for the time. And we moved down here up the road a ways to talk to you about this concern that we have regarding the bill that's been in place, the burial site preservation law. And I'm having a hard time understanding why someone would want to change something that's personal. And a bit ago, we were talking, you were saying something like doing both sides of a law or amendment, and in this case, this amendment. And I don't know what side you heard to change this, but you sure did hear our side before you began this proposal that you have in place here. And so as for starters, and I'd say there's other people that would like to comment on this, is why would you want to change something that's working? And it's only been something like 30 years that this law has been in place. And there's a lot of discussion and making this law happen for us Native Americans that reside in what is now the state of Wisconsin. And the reasons why we have these mounds that are throughout the state, and just conservatively speaking, I'd say there's probably approximately over 50% of them that have been destroyed already. And we have a few that are left here, and they're of a significant value to us. You're talking about financial, but these mounds that we have here, they are priceless to us. It tells people who we are. And yet, with a proposal such as this, and there's no way, like, if this could happen, that's going to preserve who we are as indigenous people on these lands here. And so I'd like to know the value that you have in making this law so that we, as your constituents within the state, you didn't come and talk to us and say, hey, why is this law in place? Why do I want it? Why should I change it? Or how would you do? But if there's a need for a change, I don't think that there is a need for this change that you want to happen. And what is the value of it? That you would want to do something like this.
Yeah. It seems like there's been some misinformation, and I don't know what you have been told. So I think
I was just reading what this amendment that has been made.
So since there's a lot of you here who have questions about this, I think it's important to understand what's wrong with this. We are not changing current law. So current law right now, as it's laid out, this is around, there's protection on if there's human remains. That's the protection that's in place in law right now. So that protection is not touched in any way. So if there are human remains, we do not touch it. We're leaving that in place. The only thing we're doing is we're clarifying, and even the Historical Society wrote this because there was a court case that took place, and the judge even said, based on the way things are worded in current law, there's not a real clear process in place. And the Historical Society said, the Society recognized that the particular circumstances of this person's property are at odds with the preservation of a human burial site. Their circumstances are rare, affecting a very small minority of potential landowners, and may be resolved through a specific statutory change that would simplify the process and allow projects to move forward. So the Historical Society, who's in charge of cataloging. So if there's good reason to believe that there's human remains, or they prove there's human remains in a site, the Historical Society can come in and can catalog it, and if it's cataloged, you essentially can't disturb it. But there has to be human remains there. So we're not touching that part of it. But the problem came where, under current code, in the current code, it says there's actually, it's removing from the catalog. So if there's not human remains there, there's a process in place to remove it from the catalog because there are no human remains. Okay? So somebody could go to the Historical Society and say, hey, I have a problem. We don't suspect there's human remains here. Can you prove it? And they haven't been required to prove when they catalog a site. They're not required to prove there are human remains there. So a property owner, when they walk in and they essentially take hold of somebody's property, the quiet enjoyment of that property, the onus is now on the property owner to go back and say, I don't think there are human remains there. There's a process in place to go through to get this off the catalog so I can go back to using my property. If there are any human remains there in any way, it's still shut down. You can't. The problem was when a landowner went to the Historical Society and said, I don't think there's human remains here. I want this to go through the process of getting it off the catalog. The process was not clear. Okay?
It's absolutely
So
not true,
what
Senator,
we're
and
doing,
you know that.
I will give you your time when it's your turn to talk. I want to explain this bill though. So what we're doing is we're creating a process or clarifying the process where if somebody suspects there's not human remains, they have the right under current law to go through a process to prove that. If there are human remains, it still remains in the catalog. If there's not, then they have to carry out current law and remove it from the catalog. So what we're doing is we're saying, Historical Society, we're giving you the process. You have to go through getting an approved archaeologist. But you have to test to prove there's human remains here if you're going to catalog it and take away somebody's use of property.
So
That's current law right now.
So what you're saying then is that once you bury somebody, their body's going to be in the ground like forever. At some point, you're a Christian. So in that book, the Bible, it says, ashes to ashes, dust to dust. At some point, this body is going to disintegrate into one Mother Earth. And so if that happens, it's still a burial site. There's still a body was there. It's no different than the cemeteries that are around here. That's what's going to happen that's what happened in those burial sites. Because there wasn't that preservation, and there wasn't no vaults that these bodies were put in back in the day when these mounds were made with those burial sites in them, with those burial people in them. And so they're still sacred to us.
Okay, I understand that, but we're not changing the law. If there was anything that was there and you can prove that it was there, the thing is they're going in and they're saying there are human remains here in their catalog.
So how are they going to prove that there's nothing there?
We actually lay out the process. There's an archaeological process that you can go through to determine if there's human remains. It's used all over the place. So, and again, they knew that when they created the law. So we are saying use the archaeological process that exists, and even the Historical Society understands this, and they're the experts. They choose the archaeologist that they're comfortable with. We make sure it's approved. But again, if you can prove there's human remains there in any way, that site then is taken off the catalog. And we're saying if you're going to catalog something in the future, you have to prove there were human remains there. There has to be some proof.
There is the mounds that are there. That's the proof.
just because a mound is there does not mean there's human remains.
How do you know?
Because the historical societies told us this.
They
They said, we have taken, they've done digs before.
They have not staked this.
Dig, they're already destroying it by digging into it.
Misinformation.
Then you have to go address the code the way it is. We're not touching that part of it. We're just saying you have to carry out the law as it's written right now. That's what this bill does. You're talking about if you don't want anything touched that's a mound, that is completely different from this. We're not touching that part of the law.
No, that's not what I'm saying.
It is possible that when a body is put in the ground and it disintegrates, it can disintegrate to the point where the current technology that we have cannot detect it. It depends upon when that body was placed in the ground, the conditions of the soil, and various other things that are related to it. And if the current technology we have cannot detect it, then you're going to go dig? That's not right either.
Desecration.
I just want to make sure everybody understands the process is already in place. We're just making sure that it is enforced.
But the
and
process
followed.
is
So,
incorrect.
ma'am, I need to ask for a little bit of order. I want some leniency here, but we have to keep order. I'll have the discussion, but it's going to be a discussion. It's not going to be unruled. So the president has the floor right now. If you have any further questions,
No.
I want to make sure you have your,
No.
because you got the floor. Okay, and then I need to go through in order of slips, and if we're through the slips, and there's still questions, I'll be happy to answer those, but I do want to make sure we have some order in this process.
If you would allow me to take the floor now, if there's no other Ho-Chunk representative that would like to speak.
And I am the president of the Wisconsin Archaeological Society. I am here on my own accord, and I'm not here representing the Wisconsin Archaeological Society, the State Historical Society, or any other entity other than myself. Senator, you have proposed a bill, and I want you just to bear with me,
You got the floor.
that is one of the most evil things I've ever seen in my life, okay? I have been studying effigy mounds and being directly involved with their preservation for almost my entire life, over 40 years. There is not anybody in this room that has been to more effigy mound sites than I have, and actually studied them and worked harder for their preservation. Many of the people that are sitting in this room here, like Donna and Dave and Tom and many other Ho-Chunk elders and people that are here, were people that were directly involved in the passage of the 1986 bill that Tommy Thompson, a true conservative Republican who had a vision and an understanding of what these issues really are, signed into law, okay? You are sitting in front of Ho-Chunk people that have been on this landscape since the beginning of time. Over 1,000 generations of people. These burial mounds are direct links and part of our collective cultural landscape that are almost completely destroyed by development and progress, if you want to call it that, since the beginning of the 1800s. This bill that you proposed, and believe me, we've all read it very, very carefully, and you are maintaining that this bill does not change the law. Well, it absolutely does change the law. And if you read Section 4 and Section 3 in your bill, and the way you guys have carefully worded it, it totally dismantles the Burial Sites Protection Act of 1986. There is no question about that. And I can go through this bill with you point by point and put that out to you, okay? Just so we're clear about that.
I'd be happy to do that, but not right now.
We'll get to that.
That's okay.
My question for you is, first of all, what goes back to what Clifford said here, what is the motivation behind the bill? Why, after 30 years of having a Burial Site Protection Act in place that was fought hard for by many, many people, including the tribes and people that are like myself that were friends of the tribes and friends of the Native Americans of Wisconsin, would you even consider tweaking that? You kind of explained that a little bit before, because you thought that the law was not good for the landowners and stuff. Well, I can tell you, the loophole that you're trying to use, and we're going to be frank about it, is that when you study the archaeological literature very carefully of all the excavations of mounds that have been done since the early 1800s all the way up until the early 1980s, there are a few instances where there are a couple of archaeologists who erroneously had put in the literature that they did not discover human remains in some burial mounds. Well, I can tell you from experience that there are human remains in every effigy mound and in every type of conical and linear burial mound. Now, the irony of the story here tonight, I don't know if you're aware of this, but the very mounds that are just on the other side of this wall right over here, the conical mounds are on the front property of this library and this city government building right here, happen to be the very first conical burial mounds, or the very first mounds that were ever preserved in the state of Wisconsin back in 1906 by the Wisconsin Archaeological Society and by the Women's Federation Clubs of Wisconsin. There's a little bit of irony there. I think you can see that. I'm not going to lie to you. I'm not happy with you. And I think there's a lot of people in here that are not happy. My big thing, my other big question for you is, one, what is your motivation for even considering these changes to this law? And two, what economic benefit would this have to Wisconsin other than maybe what Wingler Corporation would maybe gain from this? I'd like you to speak very frank about that.
Sure.
Because that law that you're proposing totally dismantles the Burial Sites Protection Act. You know it. I'd like to hear you explain that to the faces of these men right here, whose ancestors have been on this landscape for thousands of years, that you could desecrate their burial mounds. How would you like it if 100 years from now, somebody passed a law that we're going to go and desecrate your grandmother's grave, or maybe even your grave, Senator? And besides, the Burial Sites Protection Act of 1986 doesn't just protect Native American ancient burial mounds, it also protects early historic burials, cemeteries, and people that are possibly relatives of people that are right in this room that are white people that are not Native American. There's absolutely no justification for this bill. It is the most absurd thing I've ever seen in my life. I'm urging you, drop this bill today. That's all I'm going to say. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. I'm running this bill because I'm concerned about property rights.
Whose property?
Individual property owners, that's kind of a foundation, I believe, of when our government was created. It was individual personal property rights is extremely important. Yeah, I'm running another bill right now that deals with the similar issue. So when I heard of the issue out there, it ties right in with my adverse possession bill, because I believe that property owners need to be protected. And I don't believe that government or individuals should be able to take property rights away from people who have legitimately purchased and paid consideration for their properties. I think they have the rights to quiet enjoyment. There are laws that protect it from, obviously, public safety issues, but it's a personal property right issue that we're dealing with. So that's why I'm running the bill. But thank you for your comments. William Quackenbush from Black River Falls.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Bill Quackenbush. Bill's fine. Thank you, Senator, for allowing us to speak this evening.
You're welcome.
Also, ask for forgiveness for speaking in front of my elders. As what I'm about to ask, is just simple questions regarding this amendment that you have introduced. You mentioned that it's about property rights, and the current statutes actually assists in property rights ownership, in that it affords them the opportunity to recognize that these sites are actually cemeteries, if you must say, burial sites. Human remains there or not, they're afforded tax exemption for these sites. They catalog the sites, it's received as a human burial site there. They actually get a $1 a year tax on their property regarding that. So by taking this off of there, in fact, adversely affects landowners because of the taxation itself. That said, when our president, asked you a question regarding, how is this process, in your eyes, benefiting your constituents, which in effect is in the state of Wisconsin, population. I would say on average, to me, this adversely affects more Wisconsin constituents than it would benefit. And that being the case, I deal with the state and the federal agencies on a consultation level. I'm a historic preservation officer for the Ho-Chunk Nation, so I sit across, from the Historical Society on different matters. I sit on the DOT projects there in consultation, talking about how we're to seek out to avoid, the destruction of cultural resources. On the way down here, we talked about the steep history Wisconsin has, and you said, well, we founded this nation, and we founded this state, and this and that. And yet, in reality, the historic context of Wisconsin goes back to 1848. Everybody knows that we became a state. But the steep history and the knowledge that you have sitting in this room alone about what Wisconsin truly represents as humans indigenous to this area goes back to many more thousands of years. And it isn't that we have the ability to assist and create preservation law in Wisconsin. The only laws we rely on is this burial law now to not only protect actual physical human remains of our ancestors and, as Kurt mentioned, pioneer, family burial sites. I mean, this affects a lot more than what the eye physically can see. When we talk about the history of the Ho-Chunk in this area, and that when we do bury our dead, there's a process that takes place. These sites where these effigy mounds, for example, sit, that property there goes back many more thousands of years before those effigy mounds were even placed on there. The state law actually states that these effigy mounds, are in fact considered burial markers. So when they see mounds out there, that's no different than you go to Arlington Cemetery and see these stones out there. Well, it'd be ludicrous to think that those stones, if they were removed on there, that they're all of a sudden the graves go away. It's the analogy to use is that these are sacred sites to us. It's no different than going to a Catholic church and you see the cemeteries that lay around it. And it would be hard pressed to say that I could go in there now and prove that the cemeteries, in fact, have people buried there, right? I mean, you see it on the stones written. We see it in the effigy mounds there. We see it at our sacred sites, that these are sacred to us, and that we did place our leaders and people of value to us and other ones in these sites here to let them go back to Grandmother Earth. That process, though, once they do go back to Grandmother Earth, is still considered a sacred site to us. And we are only afforded this law here to protect cultural resources of ours because Wisconsin is real ill-equipped to actually have a preservation law. So that said, my question, again, would be the same as everybody in here is, how do you, in fact, get to a position where you don't weigh into consideration the entirety of Wisconsin population? You said your constituents and represent these people. Those people are us in there. And we look forward to having leaders that can actually do this. I'm at that age now where we're making decisions that we're trying to pass on to our children or grandchildren. And for us to stand here and say, well, we let this law go past us and barely had a voice in that, well, this is where we're at today. Thank you.
Yep. I'll just go back to current code because I think this is important. Removal from the catalog. If evidence is ever presented to the director to indicate that a catalog burial site does not contain human remains or all human remains are removed in accordance with HS 204, which is a separate section, the director shall notify by certified letter the owner, the applicant who intended or initiated the catalog request, all persons in the registry for the burial site or class of burial sites, county or local historical societies, and the local unit of governments having jurisdiction over the burial site. They give them a 60-day notice. After the 60 days, if the director decides that there is sufficient evidence to indicate that a catalog site does not contain any burials, the director shall then remove the catalog. That's current law. And I just want to re-emphasize, I am ensuring that current law is being enforced, and right now it is not being enforced. Even the Historical Society has said it. They need the clarification, and that's what we're doing.
You're co-authoring this bill. I wonder, as a Christian man, what would make you want to tear up somebody else's graves? What would make you want to even consider that as a Christian man? It makes me wonder about you. You have no heart? Why would you want to tear up somebody's grave? Just so that way they, I mean, it's between corporations? Or is it just single people? Or is it in your pocket? You're a Christian man. You're supposed to be thinking about everybody. You're a politician. You're supposed to be thinking about everybody. Shame on you. That's all I have to say.
Just want to remind everybody, if it is determined to be a burial site, it cannot be pulled off the catalog.
I am an archaeologist. I am a grad student at the University of Wisconsin. I do sit as a director at large, the board of directors for the Wisconsin Archaeological Society. I am affiliated with the Wisconsin Historical Society as well, and I'll tell you that I'm here as a private citizen representing none of them. However, having some contact with them, I find it interesting that you, on the one hand, can use the argument as a scapegoat that you don't know science and that you're not willing to understand it, but then again, you're willing to turn to science as a scapegoat. The science that is at hand cannot detect human remains inside of the ground as it is. And as an archaeologist, I'll tell you that human remains last less than 100 years in the ground that Wisconsin has because of the highly acidic nature of the soils that are predominantly here. And so what that means is under your bill, my family's cemetery, which is along the shores of the Little Wolf River in Big Falls, Wisconsin, that has my ancestors buried in it from the 1790s, there's no physical remains of those people there anymore. And nobody is left alive that can actually verify the fact that those people were there. So under your law, if Big Falls wanted to go and dig up that cemetery, they certainly could do that. There is no way, under the way that you have proposed changes, and you have proposed changes to the law, Senator, saying in front of all of these people that you've not proposed changes is a little bit slippery, and I'm a bit disappointed, but it is the case that you're attempting to change the law. And what you're saying is that in order to declassify a burial mound, in order to remove it from the catalog of burials, that you're going to force someone like me to go in there and dig that mound until we find human remains. And if we find no human remains, we have already destroyed a sacred site, and the very reason for the Preservation Act has been violated in the first place. The effigy mounds that Wisconsin has are unique archaeological resources, and they are not refunded. We can't put them back. Once we have dug them, we can't restore them. That's not something that can be rebuilt. That soil can't be put back in because of the sacred way in which they're put together. And to have the gall, the cojones to sit and look these men and women in the face whose ancestors are buried in those mounds and tell them that you're okay going in there to dig them up, that's unmitigated gall, and frankly not the kind of leadership that I guess I've associated with the progressive state of Wisconsin. I ask you, I appeal to you, please drop this law. You're digging up the dead, and I can't imagine how anybody can justify such a terrible act.
Just to clarify, Chris, cemeteries are completely separate. That's a different classification.
Mounds are cemeteries, sir.
And if there's human remains that are found there under current law,
Current law wouldn't protect
I just
my
want current laws to be
ancestors either.
enforced. So, but I appreciate your comments.
I don't appreciate you changing the law. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, Senator, just wanted to say thank you for having us this evening. Wanted to, although I know it's hard being an elected official, I'm an elected official myself. I look at myself as your equal to my constituents. I represent a sovereign nation, a Ho-Chunk nation in Wisconsin. We have our elected president here that represents us, the equivalent of the president of the United States of a sovereign nation. We also have our traditional chief here. So I just wanted to let you know who is actually here within the crowd and the way that the rest of the United States and the rest of the world looks at us. So when we came over to talk to you, we wanted to come and talk to you as equals from that perspective. And we want everyone here to know that. We thank you all for coming. We understand that this is a very hard situation when laws are proposed. I'm going to choose my words very carefully the way that we do this, from the words that come out of my mouth tonight. The issue at hand, this isn't a new issue for us. Every place that we walk within the state of Wisconsin, every building that's been built, every metro city is over all of our people. Everywhere around the United States is over all of our Native people. This is no different. So a fight like this is no different to us. But we're not here in opposition of our senator, so please don't target him. He also has to represent his people too. And it's all the people that he's trying to do. So I'm not coming to try to appeal to you in any way. What I'm asking is that you come and talk with us. Invite you to the Ho-Chunk Nation to speak with us. We are the subject matter experts on this. We have tons of history. We have all the subject matter experts here. And so we'd like to extend an invitation from that perspective. The second part is the constituents that you have. If they need education, please have them come over. And there's always two sides to a story. So if we need to understand what their arguments are, then it's not up to us to be judges either. We should not judge anyone from any perspective, because that's the way that we're taught. That's how, when we come to people, we don't come judging, arguing, and yelling, and coming with all this distraught and anger. We have to talk it out no matter what, and respect one another. I hear disrespectful things, not only from all the Facebook feeds that you're seeing. You're seeing everybody attack, talking about our burial mounds, talking about all our people. You know what? I watch everyone is guilty in this room, including myself, of allowing desecrations to happen every day. So let's not be so judgmental about this issue right now, and let's figure out how we're going to come to some sort of resolve over the issue. We have our president here. We have our traditional chief. You have an elected official from District 2, so represent the constituents all within the Winger District there. So you have two other elected officials. So I just want to make sure that I educate you to know that we do have a sovereign government. There hasn't been any consultation on this enacted by the state of Wisconsin or by this office to actually come to our sovereign nation to ask for a consultation on the issue. This is something that we should also be consulted on. That's the agreements that we put in place all along. When we were removed years ago, we fought to come back to Wisconsin. We were removed legally, all of our people. It's all in the history books. You can go through every one of the museums to figure it out. You can go through the Wisconsin State Historical Society. We can all figure that out. We know that. But that's the history that's been buried. So it's not anyone's fault in here for not knowing that you're also on top of all of our people, because they don't teach that in the state of Wisconsin. You go to the schools, they don't teach that in the colleges. So you have to go to get a degree to learn. I have a degree in an MBA. I have a Master's of Education. It's from an MS in Education in Policy Leadership in UW-Madison. I have another degree. I'm aware of your degrees, and I'm aware of each one of the group that we have. What's happening when this issue comes up, if you watch the news wires very closely, you're going to see something start erupting. You're going to see all the other tribes throughout all the United States starting to hit on this. I just want to make sure that everyone understands that. This is one of those issues where all of the nations, all of the sovereign nations will take notice, because we don't dig up our people, but this isn't about the people. Those mound sites are holy, period. That's it. We don't desecrate holy things. I'm not going to go into a church and burn it down. I'm not going to go anywhere else and desecrate anyone's cross. I'm not going to go to a mosque and desecrate that. And this is a holy site. We don't have brick and mortar. We used what was around us because we had balance with nature. Now we have all of these things that create imbalance with nature once things go back into the ground. We built things like that. We are the subject matter experts. We understand preservation, but nobody asks us. Nobody asks us about build. We've seen the law may not be changed rhetorically. It may not be changed principally. You may look for clarification in some ways with how we're crafting our words in the English language. The bill, however, there's other words in the English language that could be used. It doesn't mean that as a politician that we have to go by one word or two words or three words. Maybe there's other words to craft. And there's always work that can be added into a bill or that can be taken away from a bill. That's what the English language is about communication. It's not about getting a law passed. It's not about any of these other things. It's about creating some sort of order. And in this case, we're asking as constituents of the state of Wisconsin. We're also pleading as a sovereign nation for some respect to come over. Let's talk about it. We'll invite you over. We'll invite the other constituents, whoever else is in opposition, over, and we'll educate them on why we honor these mounds. I think that that's what the issue is not everyone understands why we honor these mounds. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Did you accept that invitation?
I am open to the invitation. Yeah, absolutely. And David did a good job of kind of laying out.
So how soon would this be? Would it be sooner than a lot of action that would be taken to your proposal so that you would have given better understanding about where we're coming from?
Yeah. So we have to see, because it was just released, we've got to work through and see what the timing would be on it. I don't think it's going to be something that would even be on the calendar in January. We'd probably be looking at February, so there's not a rush on it from my office anyway, because I want to make sure we vet the process. So maybe early in January we could do something.
All right. Thank you.
But we'll be in touch.